We happen to have Khashyar Darvich on the line, and I want to welcome him. Khashyar, can you hear me?
I can. Thank you so much for having me on the show today.
Oh, it's our pleasure, and we're really excited about talking to you about this wonderful event that is happening here in our city. But before we do, just a little bit of introduction to the people that Khashyar Darvich and Wacom Films produced and directed the award-winning Dalai Lama Renaissance documentary. And it's narrated by actor Harrison Ford, which this film won 12 awards and was the official selection of over 40 international film festivals and screened over 1,000 times around the world. And Darvich, Mr. Darvich, you're from were born in Washington, D.C. in 1966, and then you moved to the coast of Iran, where you lived there for about 4 years and developed a love for the animals and nature at that particular time in your life. And then you've moved back to Ohio, in Dayton, Ohio, in 1970 with your family. And then there you moved on to Oxford, Ohio, when you were about 6 years old, for your father to begin a PhD program. And you continued on there, going to high school, where you began your study of drama and writing. And, of course, this was only the very beginning of what you did to develop your skills and your love of writing and finding the path that has brought you to where you are today. So would you like to add anything else about just the journey of getting here, or do you want to just kind of move on into the film?
Well, as you mentioned, I did grow up in Oxford, Ohio, and I think I arrived in Oxford when I was about 5 years old. Went to elementary school, then high school, and then I went to college at the school there at Miami for about a year and a half, and just that's why I felt like it was really important that we had the Ohio premiere of these two new Dalai Lama films in Southwest Ohio. I'm Ohio, and especially Southwest Ohio. It was really important in allowing me to sort of have the space and the honesty to sort of understand how I wanted to be an artist, And I tell, as I feel very fortunate that I can travel around the world with these films and share them with audiences. The one thing that I keep with me that's so important is that friendliness that I feel like we have here in Southwest Ohio. And I lived in Los Angeles, for better or worse for the past 13 years. And I think that the people around the world, they really see sort of that quality in Ohioans. So it feels very special to come back to Ohio to see old and new friends and share these films and speak with the audiences.
Well, I've heard that Ohio is the heart center of the United States. And if that is a possibility, I can see how that comes about, because, again, I too believe that we have a very open spiritual community here, and people are open and ready to receive the goodness and the spiritual searching and wisdom. A lot actually goes on in our area that keeps us all connected, and we're growing a lot as well within this journey of this oneness here in our Cincinnati area. And you've sort of brought it full circle for yourself. You've brought it back, as you said, back to your home roots a little bit. Speaking of your roots, you have an interesting heritage or an interesting diversity in your own family lineage. Could you tell us just a little bit about that?
Yes. Sometimes when I have to explain, who I am and where I'm from, it's a little bit of a, it's not a simple, straightforward answer. My mom is actually a Swedish American, so her ancestors came from Sweden in the 1800s, and my dad is from Iran, so he's Persian American. And I actually I was in Oxford as a child, Oxford, Ohio as a child, during the Iranian hostage crisis, which was a very difficult thing for Americans. And, but what was really interesting is I didn't experience any problems at that time, which you would think that you would. So I think now how I see myself as sort of a citizen of the world. Wherever I travel, I just try and find what I have in common with those around me. I do think we have a lot more in common than we do differences. And also, I just want to add that when I grew up in Ohio, so, I was a child, I grew up in Ohio in the 70s and 80s, I didn't, I don't know if there was that kind of, open-minded, diverse spirituality so present at that time. When I grew up, it was a pretty conservative Christian area. I mean, I had some fantastic friends who are Christians, but it seems now that there's just a lot more openness and culture and ideas in Ohio than when I grew up as a child.
I'm, for one, thankful of that, and hopefully have maybe even helped make some of that happen. I would like to think that we've been on air since 1988, and it's hard for me to even believe. I can't believe that that's been a little bit of a mission just to bring consciousness to this greater experience. And we all kind of know that we have this journey, and you speak about that and some of what you're doing. But just before we pull away from you, I love that story about your last name, your Darvish, and how your father shared with you. Share that with our listeners, because as I said, I really loved it, how you took the approach to that.
Yeah, well, Darvish is a Sufi name, really. I mean, in the Persian language, in Farsi, it's the same word as dervish, as the whirling dervish. And my dad told me a story that about 400 years ago, in his small village in the mountains of Iran, that a wanderer just sort of came to the village, and he was our first ancestor on my father's side in Iran at that time, and his last name was Darvish, and he was a Sufi. So I like to think that I have a little bit of that wanderer and kind of that interest in spirituality from my DNA.
Yes, back there in your soul's knowing, there is this energy that even your name comes from, and your connection. I believe the mystery all connects it together as well. So I mean, there's no nothing is by chance, type idea.
Yeah.
So, yes, that's one of the reasons that I love that part of the story, is because it brings the magic to the experience. And are you a Buddhist yourself, or do you think of yourself more as an open-minded, spiritual individual? Or both, maybe even?
Well, I see. Obviously, I've worked on several projects with the Dalai Lama. So I feel very, very grateful that I could spend that time with him. And so I respect a lot of Buddhism. I mean, I feel like a lot of what he says, at least, isn't even religion. It's about how to become a better human being. How to find happiness, how to, help others. So, if I were any religion, I think I would be Buddhist. But I think really it's, I think everyone's purpose is trying to find a way in their life, in their everyday, of making the world a little bit better, in their own way, and just helping those around them. And I think that's my religion.
Yes, I can connect with that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in 2008, I had the honor of showing the Dalai Lama Renaissance film, and that was your first film in the trilogy, as you call it, of your Dalai Lama journey, and sharing it with us, to the community. And you've been on this journey since 1999, where this meeting and this experience all started developing. Would you like to share a little bit with us about the beginning and how you got called in to even be the filmmaker for this experience, or to film this experience, and tell us a little bit about what that experience was?
Yes. Well, I was making, in the late 90s, I was making a documentary about an American woman named Peace Pilgrim, who walked over 25,000 miles across America for peace, starting in the Korean War period. And at that time, we just asked ourselves, who's the individual who most represents peace for us? And in the late 90s, it wasn't so clear and obvious as it is now. But our first choice was the Dalai Lama, and so we just called his office, and it took about 10 months, but finally they said yes, we'd be happy to participate, and he'd be happy to join you in an interview. And then so after that, these innovative thinkers who were traveling to India to meet the Dalai Lama to speak about how to change the world, they had heard that we had worked with him in the past, and they just called me and asked if I'd be interested in making the documentary of that, of that journey to India, which is actually a journey into ourselves. That's really, what all these films are, all these Dalai Lama films. It's kind of an inner journey of personal transformation, and that's what audiences have been saying during Q&As. I just returned from a 36-city tour of the UK and Ireland, and I'm a part of what's so rewarding about that experience of making a film is traveling with the film, is meeting people at screenings, and I'm hearing their experiences and seeing what I can learn, from their insights. So I went to India to make this film, and I brought a crew of 18 with me, five cameramen and women, and a crew of 18, and just like life, there were so many twists and turns, and so many unexpected moments and things that happened, and I just feel it was fortunate that we just had those cameras there and captured that story so we could share with others.
When I was looking over some of this material about the film and, a little more detail just about your process and how things happened, that one of the things that did come up over and over again was the idea of the syncing it all together, and how the Dalai Lama sort of knew it from what I was reading, and that's sort of what I want to clarify with you. Did he have a knowing that this whole process would develop the way it did, that out of the synthesis, the chaos erupted rather than coming, because these people had come together to try to solve the problems of the world. And one of the things that I like that you say is that he had a knowing that before they could come to any understanding, they had to understand and transform themselves.
Yes. Yeah, the Dalai Lama sort of knew. Well, I want to say first that everyone's intention, for going to India and to meeting the Dalai Lama and addressing the world's problems, everyone had a very sincere intention. They really wanted to change the world, and how they thought it would happen was in some external way. The group, they thought the group would come together. Let's form a 10-point plan. And the unexpected thing, and the Dalai Lama knew this exactly, was that for real change to happen, it's not through some external group process. It's not through a product. It's through each person changing themselves. And so these characters in the film, and I don't want to give away too much, but the characters had to sort of almost crash their egos so that they could open their hearts and transform and sort of find how they could change the world through changing themselves first.
And these were some pretty popular new consciousness thought people, as well as many others. I understand there were about 40 people that were invited, and some of them are names that we've come to know. Would you share some of the main names that some people may know about that are listening?
Yes. If you've heard, there's some quantum physicists. There was Fred Alan Wolf and Amit Goswami, and they were both in the hit documentary "What the Bleep Do We Know?" They were both featured there. There's social scientist Jean Houston, she's become huge now. She was on Oprah. But just a brilliant woman. There's Michael Beckwith, another kind of influential thinker. Tom Hartman, who he's the at that time he really wasn't well known, but now he's a radio host and author, and he's a top progressive radio host in the country. So, but you know what? But it's fantastic that these 40 kind of prominent writers and thinkers and personalities, they experience some kind of transformation, and it's wonderful that we have these influential positive figures like the Dalai Lama or Pope Francis, who's he actually is putting the teachings of Jesus into practice, in a fantastic way. But real change happens. We can't wait for a Dalai Lama to change the world. We can't wait for 40 quote unquote great thinkers. We have to accept the responsibility to create the positive change that we can create, step by step, day by day, one person at a time.
I so agree, and I think that it's a wonderful reminder, and I'm glad to hear you share that. I think that the teachers, we'll call them, though, it's as though they hold the light for us. And it's almost impossible for any individual to have the all-knowing. So, because that's information. And the teachers share information, hopefully opening our hearts to the transformative process. And I think that's where the teachers are so important, and yet no one can do it for you except yourself. You have to have that desire, that willingness to travel the journey. And, that's what these films are about, is traveling the journey. One other thing that you said about the Dalai Lama Renaissance film, that you, from doing your question and answering, that you ended up experiencing, which was another thing that I enjoyed, was that you had mentioned that the movie itself presents a mirror to people, and that many of the experiences, the way we see it, is reflected from who we are, as well as not only the movie being a mirror, but the people around us are also mirrors in our process, that what we're seeing. Would you speak to us a little bit about that? And particularly from the movie's point of view.
Absolutely. I have to say, I love your questions. I love, and I love just what you're exploring on your show. I think that every human being, every experience, every film, every thing that we encounter is really a mirror for ourselves, and what that, and what I mean by that is it reflects something back to us that can help us learn or help us see something about ourselves that either we want to sort of affirm and keep being, or something that we want to change it. One thing that very thankful screenings around the world is audiences have said that the film has been a mirror for them. So as these characters travel to India and go through their own inner journey of personal transformation from their head to their heart, audiences have said that they sort of go on that journey with these characters. In filmmaking, for me, I feel like it's a calling. I feel like this is what I'm supposed to do. Everyone has their own purpose on the planet. Everyone has everyone has a unique gift, and that they're meant to share with the world and others. That's going to help others and make the world a bit better than when they first arrived on the planet. And for whatever reason, I mean, I started as a poet writing poetry in the woods around Oxford, Ohio. I'd go after school and go in the pine forest and just sit and just write stuff. But sort of that's, through that experience of writing, sort of I found that making films that have a positive story and a life-affirming message, and that inspire audiences, that's my purpose.
I want to remind our guests, our listeners, that you're listening to WAIF Cincinnati. I'm Judy Peace with you this afternoon, bringing you soul-filled sounds and conscious conversation. We have a guest with us this afternoon, and the gentleman is Khashyar Darvich, and he is the producer and director with Welcome Films and the producer of the Dalai Lama Renaissance documentary. So I hope you'll keep it tuned with us right here until 5 o'clock. One of the things that, Khashyar, that you also mentioned that I thought was interesting is that, tell us a little bit about the name of the film company and why you were inspired and moved to that, and which also shows me that you bring in a diversity of different, let's call them spiritual backgrounds within yourself. This also, when I was reading these things, I was thinking, he doesn't have just one linear mindset. He's integrating many things within his experience, which I personally enjoy. Not that everyone has to do it that way, but as I said, I do personally enjoy that. So tell us about the idea of the name of the film company and why you chose that.
Well, the name is Wakan Films. I mean, the word Wakan it's a Lakota word, a Lakota Native American word, and it means in the spirit of the Great Spirit, or having qualities of the Great Spirit. And before I made my first documentary film, I was writing scripts, and the first script was a Native American spiritual Western called Many Hidden Fires. So it was my first film project, and I just felt like that word Wakan really embodied the films I wanted to make. Films with a purpose and films that had a spiritual intention in some way. Intention of service. I mean, what's interesting is I think everyone is going through, of course, their own learning process, about themselves and what they think is going to bring them happiness. And I think we're constantly evaluating, sort of, are we happy? Are we doing what we're supposed to do in this moment in our life? So I think I started out making films kind of for me, I mean, how that sort of, how I feel now, and what feels sort of the most satisfying and fulfilling is seeing filmmaking as sort of a path of service, I mean, everyone has their own way of doing that, whether you're a teacher or a mom, or, you work at McDonald's and you sort of want to give, you want to smile at your customers or help others around you. But I feel very connected with, the only way making films is worth it for me, spending all the time that it takes to make a film and the money, the energy, is if it benefits as many people as possible. So that's just sort of a peaceful. It brings me peace, having that approach.
Well, I'd like to remind those who may not be able to continue to listen, so we don't miss out on some of the really important parts, is that you are bringing two of the films in the trilogy, which is the film we're just going to be getting in and talk about, is the Dalai Lama Awakening, and then Compassion in Action. And this will be at the Kenwood Theater on October the 15th. And there are two showings, one at 6 and one at 9. Khashyar will be available for question and answer after each film. And if you would like to have more information, you can go to... I have it all here. One of the things is you can, here it is, good. You can go to the Kenwood Theater for ticket information, and it's kenwoodtheater.com, and they're spelling theater the THEATRE version, kenwoodtheater.com. You can find more about the Dalai Lama Awakening on Facebook just by putting that in your search. And, of course, you can find Khashyar Darvich as well on Facebook. But everything is at Wacom, WAKAN.com, if you would like more information about the films and about Khashyar. So we hope that if you aren't able to continue to listen to us, that you are aware that these films are showing and that you take a look, because these are wonderful films and you don't want to miss out on the knowing about it. So we just wanted to make sure that you heard that. And Khashyar, why don't we go ahead, though, and share a little bit. I know that, as I said, you started working on the film in 1999. You spent many years with the Dalai Lama, working on the film The Dalai Lama Renaissance. And then it actually went out to the public in about 2008, which was a lot of years of just working towards trying to get that out into the world. But then shortly after you had produced that, you started feeling a deeper call and a deeper longing, that you felt that there was a little bit more, there was something more, there was more of a wholeness that you wanted to share in this concept that you've put out there. And then you felt the calling for the next film, which was the Dalai Lama Awakening. Why don't you share that with us? Because I kind of saw the Renaissance as, just the vision in my mind, like tidal visions. I often think of life as a movie. So, I see the vision of us walking with our banners and telling our truths and telling our stories, and this is the Renaissance. But at this different time in our life, we are now in the awakening. And I thought it was so appropriate for this movie to be on, that you're doing the tour now. And I love the fact that you're saying that you want to be present for this, that you don't want to just put the movie out, but you want to be a part of connecting with the people, connecting with the hearts, and finding out just what the story is, so in that connection of oneness. So why don't you share with me, I know I gave you a lot there, but why don't you share with me just from that part of that longing for the Dalai Lama Awakening?
And this is actually a part, this screening at the Kenwood Theater of the two films, Dalai Lama Awakening, which is also narrated by actor Harrison Ford, starts at 6 p.m. and Compassion and Action, which is almost like the part 2 for Dalai Lama Awakening, is at 9. And we're actually on a 100-city tour of the U.S. and Canada. And, I have a lot of filmmaker friends who don't like to tour with films because it takes, it can be tiring sometimes to just travel from city to city. But I think it is important. I mean, if the goal of our films, are to inspire audiences, to provide to inspire audiences and serve the greatest good in the best way that we can, then I heard from audiences as we were touring that it really helps go deep into each person. If there's a Q&A and a conversation afterwards about what does this film mean, what things were reflected back within you. And so that's why I tour, because I just hear from audiences that it's a deeper experience, It is for me too. I mean, I learn from every single person I meet. I learn something. So, but I spent a while making Dalai Lama Renaissance, which is the first sort of film that I did in the series. And, I was living in Los Angeles and I had this team around me, kind of a small team. And they all felt like, for theaters, it should be a certain length. It should be, a certain kind of condensed story. And so I edited a 2-hour version of the film, which I felt it expressed sort of the heart and soul of that story. It was the authentic telling of that story. It was poetic, and it was my soul made into a film. And then, but these Los Angeles, film people who, I won't mention names because some of them are my friends, but they just felt like it had to be, condensed, and stuff had to be cut out. And so we actually brought in this editor who had worked on an Academy Award-winning documentary called American Dream, a Barbara Koppel film. And so he came in and he sliced and diced, and he created the 82-minute version, which became Dalai Lama Renaissance. And at the time, I felt like someone had taken taken my soul, and just kind of sliced pieces out of it. I don't want to be dramatic, but it felt like that the emotion and the poetry was kind of cut out of that film. But it did well. I mean, as you mentioned, it did screen over 1,000 times around the world. It did, I appreciate that it won awards and did very well. But I still felt like that that film did not it wasn't the full film that was supposed to be made and shared with the world. But, I just sort of, that was in the back of my mind. That feeling was within me. But I just said, okay, you know what? You can't get what you want all the time. This is the film. It's doing well, fantastic. About last year, I was in my film office in Los Angeles, and we have a great team there of really dedicated filmmakers who really want to make films that make a difference and inspire people. So I pulled out my sort of my pure vision of that film. I pulled it out and showed it to about 20 people on my team, and 18 out of 20 of them felt like that the director's cut was so much more emotional and complete and cinematic, and which was shocking, because that's not what I heard from these these LA insiders. So I said, you know what, I'll just finish this film, and we'll share it just so it's available. So we actually went back to India. And filmed an additional 400 hours of footage. I brought this crane to the slums of India, and I spent 3 months there with a crew, and we filmed these stunning shots that I was going to include in Dalai Lama Awakening. And then when I began to screen Dalai Lama Awakening, I had done over 400 Q&As of Dalai Lama Renaissance, the previous film. But when I sat with audiences in these first few preview screenings last winter, I could just feel that there was a different, emotional experience that the audiences were feeling. And every screening, there was someone who was crying at the Q&A, saying, how they felt changed, by the experience, of going through that journey with the characters in the film. So I felt, I wasn't, I'm my team and I are working on 6 other, positive documentaries, but I felt like I just had to share this film more widely, and it felt like finally, I was fulfilling my purpose in this film. So life for all of us, maybe we have one idea of what life is going to be, and then we just, life takes us in different directions, and most of the time those directions are to a more fantastic, satisfying place than we could have ever imagined.
And it's fun to get to the place where, and it is a process, but it's fun to get to the place that we trust that message within ourselves, that you trusted that, rather than listening to the outside voice saying, oh no, it has to look this way, that your longing was there until you had basically spoke your true voice, basically spoke your true heart in the experience. So, and I am excited about being able to experience this new film of the Dalai Lama Awakening. Of course, the subject, and as many of us are inspired by the teachings and the wisdom of the Dalai Lama, that in itself is something that we don't get to see a lot of. Just seeing him communicating or ideas around his teachings in a visual sense, as you're sharing with us by using the avenue of film as an expression. So that in itself is fun. And then knowing that you have so much heart in this is also something that's really drawing me to say, oh, I want to see this. I want to see this. And you have the third one as well, which is compassion in action, and you say that it's sort of like part two, so it's the continual story, or you're not coming in from a different just whole viewpoint, but it's a continuation of being able to bring it to like a finale of what all this information was about, which is compassion and action. This is where we're headed. This is where we're going with our own growth, our own transcendence, our own processing.
Yes. Yeah, it's compassion and action. Just again, that was a project that really wasn't meant to happen either. It wasn't planned. We just, through all the interviews that, from the filming and the interviews we did with these amazing thinkers, as well as the Dalai Lama, we saw, some other way of sort of seeing how we put compassion into action. We saw a unique story and insights that we just thought, it's important to share this in a film. And audiences have felt like, that the two films really offer a complementary, complete experience. That what I've heard from audiences is Dalai Lama Awakening is this inner journey of personal transformation, for the characters in the film, but also the audience. And compassion action is an exploration of how do we, what are the problems of the world? Like what's the root and the heart of the problems of the world? And what specific things can we do to help solve those problems, and there's a and a hint to that answer, I guess, is in the title, but you have to see at the screen.
And I'm so glad that you have, as you said, come back sort of away to your roots, to your hometown, or your home area, not Ohio southwestern or southeastern area, that you are, back to a place that a lot was developed within your own self. And we are very happy here in Cincinnati to have the opportunity to experience this. That I'm excited. At the time that the Dalai Lama Renaissance came out, I was one of the people, I guess you could say, was holding and carrying the banner saying, we've got to see this, we've got to see this. And I was doing, bringing good film to our area under Conscious Choice Cinema. Things as life does, presents things that ask us to take a different path or a different journey. But in the process of the time, I did get to show the Dalai Lama Renaissance, and I'm really glad that it was one that we did get to show, because it was one of the favorite of all the ones that did get to be shown during that period of time. I know we had a great turnout here in Cincinnati, and I'm hoping, and it looks like that there's going to be a really wonderful turnout. I want to let everyone know that this is a one-time showing as well, that he's not going to be around for a couple of days or a couple of weeks. This is only on October the 15th. So if you have any interest in seeing this film with the director, the producer, Khashyar Darvich, that you would put it on your calendar. So, and again, you can check out the websites at facebook.com Dalai Lama Awakening to see more about the film, to see more about the overall sense of Khashyar and the films that he's doing. I saw somewhere that you're working on 7 different films a little bit at this time, and yet you had to, you're staying focused as well on this, but there's a lot of things that you have in your mind that you want to sort of get out there at some time. So all of that is on wakan.com, and that's WAKAN.com. And then, of course, you can get ticket information and be reminded of timing and everything, which the first film, Dalai Lama Awakening, is at 6 p.m., and then Compassion in Action is at 9. Both films will have question and answers with Khashyar. So we hope that you will consider this opportunity. And that website is kenwoodtheatre.com. And again, remember, theater is spelled Theatre in this situation. Okay? Well, Khashyar...
I wonder if I just...
Yes, please do.
Just really quickly, the entire schedule for the for this tour, as well as the trailers for these films, are on DalaiLamaFilm.com website.
Okay.
So if you have friends in other parts of the country, who want to see it, where the entire schedule is on that website.
Okay, that sounds great. And is there anything else that one of the words that you used, which I liked, was that the Dalai Lama Awakening was a poetic revision of the film. And why would you call it that? Why would you say poetic? What is it that you put into it that you felt that word was appropriate to use?
I just, I felt like, and it feels, I grew up as a poet, so I just felt like, Dharma Awakening is the film that my soul and heart really wanted to make, and we added 40 minutes of additional footage that we filmed. That's very cinematic. That's very poetic in a way. But I think the reason why I use the word poetic with Dalai Lama Awakening is because I think if you as a filmmaker or a writer, an artist, or even a mom, let's bring in moms and give them all the credit that they deserve. That there are a lot of, there's a lot of meaning and, unspoken meaning that you can receive through images and the way that images are put together. And like a poem, where, in that one line of a poem, there's meaning on various levels. There's the obvious meaning, the surface meaning, but if you let it sit within you, it kind of speaks to you in different ways. That's how I really love to make films, and so I really felt like Dalai Lama Awakening. That speaks to audiences from what I heard from them on several levels. So that's. I want to hear though. I'd love to hear from audiences. If they feel like it's poetic. Wow. I'd like everyone's opinion.
I'll be there, and I'll tell you what I saw in the experience. And we both are coming from the the Venus perspective, being Libras. So we see beauty in a certain way. So yes, I look forward to seeing your creative essence in this film, being able to express what you really wanted to express, your own calling from the very beginning. And I'm so happy that you got to create this for yourself and create it for our community. And I look forward to the experience. So I thank you so much, Khashyar, for taking your time out this afternoon and giving us a call and having conscious conversation with us on Waves of a New Age. And I look forward to meeting you.
Thank you too, Judy. I really appreciate the chance to speak about consciousness, life, and film. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. We'll see you soon.
Look forward to it, Judy.
All right. Thanks. Bye. We were just talking to Khashyar Darvich, who is the producer and director of the award-winning films Dalai Lama Renaissance, and he will be presenting the Dalai Lama Awakening and Compassion in Action at the Kenwood Theater on October the 15th. You can go to the Facebook pages and find Dalai Lama Awakening, and all of the information will be there about this wonderful presentation. I hope to see you there. I'd like to remind you that this show is brought to you in part by the Conscious Living Center, supporting people on their journey of well-being with counseling, coaching, workshops, and the School of Conscious Living. The Enneagram is used for our work in self-understanding, compassion, and transformation. More information about the Conscious Living Center can be found at goconscious.com. Again, that's goconscious.com.